Can you see him? board and thank her for rejoining us. She was on the board for a number of years and is coming back on to replace a board member that resigned. So we will start with roll call, Jackie.
Board Member White.
Here.
Corbush.
Here.
Boyce.
Here.
Rosga.
Yes.
Smith.
Present.
Okay. Public comment. If we have anybody from the public that wants to make any comments, you're welcome to come to the podium. Seeing nobody moving, we'll move on to the consent agenda item. We really just have one item here related to minutes from the last two board meetings. Any questions or comments on those? And Deb, it's too bad you couldn't join us up there, because we had a good discussion on the strategic planning session last Tuesday.
The short version.
Yes, it took us a while to get through it. Okay, unless there's any comments or questions, I'll entertain a motion.
Second.
Motion and a second. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? The consent agenda items are approved, and we'll move on to electric utility information items. Mike.
Start off with pickups. Got a hold of the guy up there that we ordered those in April last year. They are on, he confirmed that they are ordered. The factory will not give them a date of when they'll be delivered or anything. So we're still waiting on those. Hopefully they make this year's budget.
Mike, what factory are they built at?
Dodge. And I did ask him, I said, what about other manufacturers? Can we cancel this? Can we give it a different one so we get a truck? And he said Dodge is actually the best one he's come across the field in that position. So
When did you order it?
April of 2021. Otherwise, been working on budgets. The Turbine 7 bypass valve that we were talking about, taking that out. We did get that out. We got that shipped off down to Texas. Hopefully we'll hear something back this week as far as where they're at in that process. We didn't get it out quite as quick. We had that snow event on that, all that snow on that Friday, and the trucking, they shut down the trucks and didn't come pick it up. So we was a couple days behind on that, getting it out. Otherwise, we're working on maintenance side equipment in the shop right now as well.
That's fine. We'll move on to communication utility action items. We have one item related to a public hearing for February 14th for the fiber extension to the water resource recovery facility project. 296. Did I skip one? I'm sorry, I did skip one. Let's go back to 6, water utility action items. Authorization of Warren Water to serve a resident. And this is, I kind of had some email communications. This is not accurately stated.
Adam, I put a replacement one in front of all of you.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
So the actual memorandum is replaced in front of us that reads correctly. I just want to clarify that when we get these requests from Warren Water, they are for customers that are in Warren Water's territory, not in IMU's territory.
Right, IMU gave Warren Water that territory years ago, all the territory.
Long time.
Yeah.
Right.
They did, we just could not run a water main out for one farmhouse, and they had federal funding, so, but by law, they have to say, okay, we have this customer that's in the 2-mile boundary. Are you gonna run a water main out here and buy this territory back from us? And we say no.
So is it a state law that?
It's a state law, they have to do it, and I can't say, we're not gonna serve, as a board, you have to say, we're not gonna run a water main by. We have purchased territory back. Going north, we did, you know, $280,000 to get the dealership and all those customers back that we gave, and we had to purchase out by the Catholic Church. There, that development south of the church, we had to pay $6,000 for us to serve them, so they would have fire protection. Because they, the contractor ran the water main out there, but we serviced those 8 customers too. You know, had to pay for them.
So I thank you for correcting the memo, and I just want to make it clear to everybody that these requests from Warren Water are not IMU giving away or selling any territory to Warren Water. It's their territory, and they're required to notify us and us to accept it because it's within 2 miles of our territory.
That's a good clarification.
Yeah. So I think that I suggested some wording, both for the subject line as well as the recommendation, if you want to read through that now, but I think should clarify that more than I did before. And unless there's questions or other comments on that, I would entertain.
Well, the only comment I would make is there may come a time down the road where it's not feasible for us to start serving some of those customers. And when we do, we will.
Yep.
So it's not like we're turning a blind eye to things.
And the territories that we chatted with Warren Rural Water on, they were probably more than willing to, work with us in half on the two properties, so on two sides of town.
Do we know what that criteria would be? That would be the kind of tipping point of when we would say, okay, it's worth our while.
If we could get, a little mini development or something, or a customer that might want to have fire protection or a business, and extend out. One of the things we have done to anyone that we've added on in those areas, they voluntarily annexed into the city. So we've added them, in that. But in most cases, we're in Mid-American's electric territory and outside the wastewater facilities ability to serve. So it's just water only.
So that I make a motion to warm water serving or rural water serving.
Second.
We have a motion and a second. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
And any opposed? That action item is approved. And then other water utility commission items.
We're just basically working inside in doing our winter maintenance items, working on pumps and whatnot. Line machine, we putting new gears into it and replace shaft, the normal wear and tear kind of things. So staying busy with that.
How about water main breaks? Lots of those lately, or?
It's standard operating procedure. And I'm not talking about that. Every time we do, we have one. No, we had 10 weeks where we didn't have one, and then last week we had 4. But we were able to do all 4 with just a few calls.
In the same area or?
No, different areas of town, and ground shift, snapping the main, like they do those old iron mains. Yeah. I know they had to cancel school for one of the elementary schools in Des Moines last week because they had one right and they couldn't get it fixed by the time, worked all night on it, I guess. But so that's where we're at with that. I was just kidding.
No, that was a fair comment. I deserve that.
That's all I've got.
Thanks, Lou. Okay, now we'll move on to the item that I tried to move on to earlier, the communication utility action item, setting a public hearing for February 14th for the fiber extension to the water resource recovery facility project. That's quite a mouthful.
It is, isn't it? So we could abbreviate WRRF. So anyway, so yeah, this is just setting the public hearing for the 14th. We've got the bid packet out now. We'll have bids coming back in on the 7th, and then we can take a look and see what we get in and approve plans and specs on the 14th. So this is just to set the public hearing for that. So.
And I know we've talked about this in concept, but I don't know that we've talked about numbers at all yet. Do you have an estimate for, not that we want to give away a number, but
I do, and yeah, we'll talk about that a little bit later in
Okay.
other business tonight. Yeah. Okay.
and then how the source of funding for that too?
Yeah, exactly. I've got all that for you. So.
Perfect. Okay, so this action item then is only to set the public hearing date. We're not approving anything else. And unless there's questions or comments, I would entertain a motion for that.
So second.
Motion on the second. This is roll call, isn't it, Jackie? Go ahead.
Board Member White,
Yes.
Forbush,
Yes.
Boyce,
Yes.
Rozga,
Yes.
Smith.
Yes.
Okay, that resolution for the public hearing on February 14th is approved. And other communication utility information items.
Yeah, not a lot. Like I said, we'll have some reference here in a bit, but just cold weather. We're trying to keep up with things as the temperature gets above freezing. We're getting out in front of the temps and getting them down on the ground. So far we've been able to keep up with installs and everything. So fingers crossed, we're almost through January, and normally by March it starts to break for us. So a few more weeks and we should be out of the woods, so to speak, for winter, hopefully. So.
How many customers do you have kind of waiting for the weather to improve?
You know, so far we haven't had to push anybody off. We are about 3 weeks out on scheduling now, just because it takes a little more time to get those temps on the ground. Takes a couple guys to go out and do that, but so far we haven't had to reschedule anything. So again, fingers crossed, we still got to get through February, but so far so good on that. So
Good. Okay. Thank you, Kurt. We can move on to combined electric, water, and communications action items. We have one item related to setting a public hearing date for February 28th for the fiscal year 23 budget. Something we do every year about this time. Again, we're just setting a public hearing date, and we will have additional discussions related to the budget starting here tonight and then continuing in the next few meetings. Anything you want to add to that, Chris?
nope. You summed it up nicely.
Other questions or comments on that? Otherwise, is there a motion?
Second.
Motion and a second. Go ahead, Jackie.
Board Member Forbush,
yes,
Boyd,
Yes.
Rosga,
Yes.
Smith,
Yes.
White.
yes,
Okay, that resolution is approved for the public hearing on February 28th. And then we'll go on to combined electric, water, communication, information items. We have several topics here to discuss. And we will start with an audit report presentation. Robert Endres with the audit firm is here with us tonight. And Chris or Robert, I'll let you guys determine who starts things out for us.
Now I'll hand it over to Robert. I'll have a few words to say and we can discuss as necessary.
Thank you and good evening. Again, my name is Robert Endres. I'm an audit partner with Denman & Company. Denman has performed the fiscal year 2021 audit of IMU's financial statements. We'll go over that audit report briefly, look at the summarized financial information, talk briefly about our work on internal controls and compliance, and wrap up quickly with the governance communication. Now, on page 4, you'll find the audited independent audit report. This hasn't changed in any profound way over that report you've seen in the past. There's a couple matters to reiterate. First, these financial statements are those of management. Management is responsible for ensuring that they're complete, that they're accurate, and they conform with accounting standards, and that internal controls are in place to help support the preparation of those statements. Our responsibility as IMU's auditors is to perform an audit and to express an opinion on the financial statements. We perform that audit in accordance with our professional standards, which include government auditing standards. And that audit includes a series of audit testing that includes maybe looking at supporting documentation, imputing transactions and balances, inquiries, analytical procedures, a host of other procedures, all intended to give us an understanding of those transactions and balances inherent to your financial statements and to allow us to express an opinion. You'll find our opinion at the very bottom of page 4 of that audit report. And in our opinion, these financial statements do present fairly in all material respects, clean or unmodified opinion. Now, diving into the statement briefly, in front of us here, we have a very summarized version of the statement of net position. Total assets at the end of the fiscal year were just short of 75 million. The overwhelming majority of that is capital assets, so illiquid in nature. However, there's also about $15.5 million worth of cash. Liabilities total about 23.5 million, 23.5 million. The majority of that's long-term in nature, the obligations typically, and that leaves us with a net position of about 51 million. I think the majority of that is net position in capital assets, so we can still be liquid. There's about 13.7 million there you can see as our unrestricted net position. That's the net position available to utilities to execute its operating objectives. Jumping over to the statement of revenues, expenses, and changes in that position, more commonly known as the income statement. Total operating revenues for the year just over 22 million. Operating expenses right over 20 million. Give us an operating margin just short of 2 million during the fiscal period. Other the net position, most notably interest, draw that down just a little bit. We end with 1.6 million to the good to net position. Majority of that is ran through the electric utility, 1.1 million in the electric utility. Fiber ran a slight deficit in the year, about 80,000. That is a pretty profound improvement in operating results from the prior period. We saw about $1.1 million deficit in fiber. Of course, fiber is expected to run deficits for the first couple of years, but we are now quite close to seeing that run in the black as well. Now, jumping over to our work on internal controls, this diving all the way back to page 50 for keeping track in the actual audit financial statements. Just a reminder, our scope of our engagement is to perform an audit of the financial statements and to express an opinion on the financial statements, not necessarily to express an opinion on internal control. However, during the course of our audit procedures, we have a responsibility under our professional standards to evaluate controls, at least from a broad perspective, so that we understand, broadly speaking, what the control activities of the utilities are. That broad understanding helps us better define audit testing approaches and helps us better identify audit risk. If we identify deficiencies during our broad understanding, we have responsibility to either evaluate them and elevate them to management or to the board of trustees, depending on their significance. However, because of that limitation of control work that we're just gaining broad understanding, it is possible that control deficiencies may exist and not be identified during the course of financial statement audit. Just part of the nature of financial statement audits. And finally, the state of Iowa does ask us to look at compliance, certain compliance requirements, and we do report out on non-compliance that we identify. So with that as our background, in this year's audit report, we do have a couple recommendations, 2 related to internal control and 2 related to compliance. The report itself is a pretty robust write-up of those recommendations, provides a little bit of context into where they are, how they occurred. Our recommendation itself, of course, is there, and also management's response. Now, for those of you who were involved last year, you will recall that we had several recommendations in last year's audit report. What we see in front of us this evening does represent a fairly significant reduction in the number of recommendations we made through the course of the audit. That's reflective of the fact that we are now 12 months further removed from a very challenging system conversion that IMU went through last year, and the fact that staff worked quite diligently to address those matters that we went through last year. I did want to address one of these real briefly with this evening, the cash to accrual adjustment, to make sure we have that one in proper context. That is a material weakness, which is the higher level reporting deficiency. But I wanted to place some background there, some little bit of history for you as well. That recommendation pertains to IMU's usage of cash basis accounting for its internal financial statements, and therefore the need to migrate those cash basis financial to accrual course of our audit work. That's a pretty common accounting approach for small local governments that don't have a lot of complexity or need for a robust internal reporting. However, IMU is not a small local government anymore. This is a $75 million agency. We just noted 22 million in revenue. It's a lot of transactions to keep on a pretty simplistic accounting approach and try to migrate year end. So it's not all that surprising to me to find that staff do find such a challenge making that conversion. With that said, staff are well aware of this. One of the first conversations I had with the management team when Denman became engaged was a discussion about migrating IMU to a full accrual basis. So this has been on staff's bucket wish list for some time, and we are starting to see that progress being made towards implementing the full accrual basis internally. Just when you have 75 million in assets, this is a couple audit cycle events to try to migrate that accounting system over. All right, just one more slide for you this evening, then I'll be happy to answer any questions. Along with every audit we issue, we also issue a governance letter. That governance letter is an opportunity for us to speak directly to governance about items that we think warrant governance's attention during the course of the audit. Frankly, we have a very boring governance letter in front of you this evening. That's good news. We don't like accepting governance letters. But a couple of things here worth discussing briefly. First, all financial statements, including IMUs, do have estimates in them. We do evaluate those estimates as part of our audit procedures and have concluded that management's estimates are indeed reasonable and appropriate in circumstances. As part of our audit procedures, we do make recommendations to staff regarding adjustments to accounts and balances. We've shared those with staff. Staff have agreed to them and have or will be posting them to IMU's accounts. Along with that, there are instances where we personally will not make adjustments to accounts and balances. We call these pass adjustments. We do share these with staff as well, and we evaluate them with staff to ensure that they do not materially misstate the financial statements. So while we do have a couple pass adjustments this year, we have shared those with staff, and staff and I, and then are in agreement that they do not misstate the financial statements. They do not impact our audit opinion, but we do have a responsibility to at least acknowledge that they do exist. Finally, in my opinion, the most important thing you see in this letter is that we have no disagreements with management during the course of our audit. No difficulties working with staff and performing the engagement. I do want to thank Chris Longer and the rest of the IMU team for putting up with us, staff. We do monopolize their time. We're quite grateful for their willingness to work with us and ensure that our needs are met while also trying to get all the other day-to-day activities done. With that, I'm happy to answer any questions on the audit report you have in front of you or procedures or anything else I can help you with.
So Robert, I do have a question on the cash to accrual process.
Yes.
You mentioned it's a process to get to maybe ultimate state.
It probably is reasonable to expect this to be an incremental improvement.
Is there a methodology or procedure priority in how we address that? And is the team in the loop on that? Is there some training that we need to be thinking about?
Sure, there's not necessarily a step A to Z approach here. Certainly, some of the changes that IMU's already made, I think changing the accounting system is going to assist in that quite a bit. Since the old accounting system was really conducive to allowing it to occur in the first place. Certainly, there's a fair bit of training that some of the accounting team will need to do. And bear in mind, we're not just talking about administrative staff here making changes. It's going to be felt throughout the organization. So there's going to be some cultural changes that are going to be felt throughout the organization. Department heads will have to budget differently, account for things differently. So there's going to be some growth there. I don't have a specific A to Z event that needs to occur, but in my conversation with both Chris and Chris Longer, they seem to have a pretty good plan in place and how they want to approach it.
Chris, you want to add any comments to that? I know that's been on your plate, and I think you worked with Chris longer on that.
Yeah, certainly. I think in comparison to last year, I think what we're focusing on or what we're talking about here is far less significant in nature. We've nailed down a lot of those processes and procedures necessary to do this well. And like Robert said, there are a few last things. One thing that I think probably is one of the bigger dollar items. We followed this kind of as a materiality approach, and some of that was ease of use with the new accounting system that made those easy to accomplish and check off the list. We're really where we're at now is or the big change in hurdle that we're looking at now is really capital asset related. There's a couple of other little items, but we're booking a lot of, we do our budgets on the cash basis, and in that cash basis, for example, purchasing a pickup is an expenditure, and you'll see that on the budget. And throughout the year, we kind of maintain those large purchases on that cash basis. And that gives, it makes it easier for us to report that cash basis information to the city at the end of the year. Where we're kind of, this is a little bit of a difficulty. We're straddling the cash basis activities to give us ease of reporting some information to the city. But we do know that it is better, and we would prefer to do this on a full accrual basis, and coming up with the processes, procedures that surround a way to both give the ability for the utility to provide information to the city on a cash basis and do this accrual for our own purposes. We're straddling that those two events, and ultimately there's a couple of other things, but those capital assets and how we record those and the dollar value against our budget is really the most significant hurdle remaining.
And so do you feel like, and maybe Robert, you can answer this too, that you've made progress on this issue from the comment last year compared to the comment this year?
Yes, I would agree with that. Certainly, at least a couple significant accounting transaction classes will migrate over. So I would argue that I use kind of on a modified cash basis, which is even more common for a small government. I still think that's risky to do. I think full accrual is probably the best suited for Item, given us how large you are. But now it's more traditional with a modified cash basis, which is absolutely the first step.
Robert, your recommendation then is to report on a full accrual basis. We know that the city continues to run on a cash basis.
Yep.
So,
So
how do we bridge this?
Yes. So your external financial statements are on the full accrual basis. So we back up here and kind of lay the standard a little further. As I alluded to at the very beginning, management is responsible for these financial statements, and these financial statements are on the accrual basis. That's I don't know the history there. I can guess, but I'm not going to speculate. But I use full accrual financial statements are how we report externally. It's not reasonable to ask staff to maintain these two separate sets of books. It's just there's a whole bunch of balance sheet accounts that's just not practical to try to maintain separately, which means IMU needs to run its internal financial statements on a accrual basis. The transition over to the city, there's undoubtedly going to be some growing pains as we figure out what best information the city needs versus what IMU is generating. While that transition might be a little bumpy at first, I have no doubt that the information is there. For instance, the AFR report, I can point you to 5 numbers on here that's going to take care of that. Budgeting might be a little trickier. There's solutions to that will come up organically as we work through that. And it'll just be a matter of having that dialogue to ensure that they get their understand what INE is generated and that INE understands what they need.
So what I correct in assuming then that you and or your staff would also be available to assist in that process and make sure that that's a smooth transaction as we go forward. Good, thank you.
The only thing I want to add here is just to acknowledge, you mentioned this, Robert, but I think there were 9 findings last year and we're down to 2 this year. The cash to accrual is a repeat that carried over from last year to this year. The inventory one is new. I have asked Chris, and I didn't expect him to have it tonight, but I have asked Chris to go through and lay out a little bit more of the detailed explanation for why this happened the way it is, and then his plan for correcting it going forward, that he can report to us as a board at a future time. Any other thoughts or comments on that?
I have one question. How long do you anticipate before you can be on an totally accrual system?
Our intent is to have that done by our fiscal year end. So at the next time we see Robert, hoping to have all that wrapped up.
So really, by June 30th.
Yeah. Yeah. Or almost.
So we've been working on it. It seemed like it would take several cycles, and maybe this is our second cycle that we're talking about it.
I think have the expectation to have me that I think it's aggressive, but I think it's doable to have all your balance sheets. Now, the audit process is a great way to vet staff's progress, and so don't be panicked if we have recommendations next year, even though staff say they're fully implemented. That's not to be discouraged or disappointed by. Our goal from our side of the table is just to ensure that we're seeing progress, and I have no doubt that it will be progress. I can tell already throughout during the fall that we're seeing staff addressing that weren't addressed until June 3, 2021. Never being addressed.
And so just to close out here, I want to give kudos to Chris, mainly Chris Desplanks and Chris Lummer. I really appreciate them digging in and figuring out ways to avoid having the compliance items that we had last year. I think they made significant progress. We've still got some work to do, but I think that's to be expected. And we're really only a year and a half into converting to the new accounting system that is allowing us to do the accrual basis reporting.
Correct.
On the former system, it wasn't set up for that, so we really couldn't have done that.
Exactly.
So. Any other comments or questions for Robert or Chris related to the audit? Thank you, Robert. Thank you, Robert.
Thank you.
Okay, the next item is discussion on the INU mission statement. We talked about this briefly last week, but Chris mentioned that it would be on the agenda for this week. Go ahead.
Yeah, we touched on that briefly originally at the strategic planning session, just kind of as that a little bit of the first step in those strategic plans about what we are and what we're going to accomplish. We talked about it a little bit more at our follow-up to that meeting. And I do have the draft, and I'll kind of read through what we have, and from there hand it over for some comments, feedback, and any further discussion.
And Chris, if you wouldn't mind, I wonder if you have it handy, can you read what the mission statement was previously, and then read what we, I think, really kind of as a group came up with for going forward. I didn't mean to put you on the spot.
I don't have that.
Was this discussed at the strategic planning thing?
That's really, that's Chris indicated.
We initiated it in October when we had our first meeting. Oh, okay.
And Chris, that's not easy, just go ahead and read.
Okay, yeah,
Sorry,
trying to find
I
that.
should have
but,
warned you on that one.
where we left off, I have the Indianola municipal utilities are committed to providing essential, high quality and cost-effective electric, water, and communication services to resident and commercial customers.
I like it.
I do as well.
And just as a little bit of background for anybody that's interested. So it used to be that the mission statement was kind of a joint mission statement for both the city and the utility. I think when the city went through and did their comprehensive plan, they revised the mission statement a little bit, is my understanding, and kind of separated it out from IMU. And so really this is just taking a similar approach and having a mission statement that's focused directly on IMU and really who we serve and why we do it.
Can you read the revised statement? Because that's different than what we had in our packet first round.
Yeah, the Indianola Municipal Utilities is committed to providing essential, high quality and cost-effective electric, water, and communication services to resident and commercial customers.
Well, I think I like it because I think it says exactly what we do in as few words as possible.
Well, you're not looking for an action item on this. You're just looking for consensus from us.
Consensus, that's what we'll use. We'll kind of update, or you kind of alluded to a slightly different version that was used in that strategic planning draft. We'll update that as well as a couple of the other items that came out of last Tuesday's meeting, and have a draft here come out shortly that we'll be able to review and adopt as a group.
So are we targeting that first meeting in February to adopt that, or do we think we'll need more time than that?
Shouldn't need more time, but depending on how lengthy the budget meeting gets, it may be more time appropriate to move that to a later meeting.
Okay. All right, are we ready to move on to the job description, general manager job description? And maybe I'll start with just a little background on this, and I'm looking to Lori a little bit, because I think when we went through Chris's evaluation process back in the late fall, Lori very validly asked, well, what's the job description? And there has been a job description in the past. There was a search process when we found Chris. There was search materials that were available that really had a lot of the same concepts as a job description, but it was really pretty clear that we needed to update and just get that updated and document it. My understanding is that, Chris, you can confirm this, we have job descriptions for all of the other IMU positions, staff positions, but we just really hadn't updated this at general manager.
Yeah, correct. This was the only IMU employee that didn't have a job description.
So Chris Longer, I think, took the initial steps of drafting the job description based on a former job description and some of the search materials. I reviewed it and had some feedback. Lori reviewed it and had some feedback. And then so now this is really the opportunity for other board members to add to the feedback and let us know if there's any modifications that you. Chris, I would also open this up to you. I haven't necessarily asked you, are you okay with what is in this job description, because it really describes what we're expecting you to do. So
Yeah, no, I do think it's a great improvement. Chris and I, she worked, I think, more closely with various trustees, and we had discussion at every step. So I'm happy with how it turned out, and recommend this be approved and adopted.
or do you have anything to add to that?
No, I think Chris Longer did a really nice job kind of pulling some things together. We sat down after the feedback and just kind of consolidated some of the responsibilities. I do think it's more clear than maybe what we've had or not had in the past. So I think it helps us maybe set the stage for setting goals and how we work forward from performance.
I have just a quick question. I don't have it in front of me, but I was surprised at some of the physical requirements, and I kind of wanted to know why those were so extensive.
I honestly didn't do much with this one because I didn't necessarily know what the requirements should be. I assume that's more typical of a city employee.
We have these requirements listed out in some way, shape, or form. Not necessarily maybe that first bullet point describing all the physical activities, but all of our jobs are classified as level 1, 2, 3, and 4. This is more reflective of a level 2 position, not a 3 or 4. And ultimately, those physical requirements are just echoing that level 2 job that's the most common. It doesn't put tons of restrictions on that. It's kind of the default standard for clerical administrative type of position.
So this is on clerical positions as well. It's first bullet.
Can you read, what is the first bullet?
Driving,
Driving,
climbing, stooping, kneeling, crouching, reaching, standing, walking, pushing, pulling, lifting, finger dexterity, grasping, feeling, talking, hearing. I guess it covers it all.
Yeah.
Well, my only question would be from a disability standpoint. I would think that somebody in a wheelchair could probably do the job. Could they not?
Yeah, I would agree.
Absolutely reasonable, yeah.
Yeah, it's a good point to think of that.
So,
Would we remove it or modify it?
I wonder, Chris, if you can kind of refer this back to Chris Longer, and maybe she can work with Courtney, the city, the HR director.
From an ADA
Well, but
perspective?
Yeah, from an ADA perspective, and just see if we need to modify that.
Then you also have to ask the question, so if that's a general clerical thing, that we have in all those different things, I mean, do we have those in your CSRs? Are those requirements for that? I'm just saying, if, we should probably review those physical requirements for those folks too.
I think talking with Courtney, it's probably good to get the ADA guidance and then they can decide if they need to do a full review on this. Good call, Leslie.
And so with this item aside, any other comments or questions related to the job description? Hearing none, then Chris, if you and Chris Longer work with Courtney to make potentially some modifications to this one bullet point, do you anticipate bringing this back to us for review and formal approval, or is this more of just a consensus item too? That we need to.
I think we have all the other ones that have been at some way, shape, or form approved by the board. I do note that the CSRs do have that same exact verbiage as the first bullet point. And there's a little bit of difference in the back end, but that first one is common amongst those. So ultimately, my recommendation is let's put this off or put approval off. We certainly got consensus that this meets all our requirements. We'll address this one issue and bring any job descriptions forward. Certainly you'll see the general manager job description, and if it's determined that there needs to be some modifications to the rest of the CSR job descriptions, we'll bring all of those forward at the same time.
Okay.
And I do think Chris Longer made a note in her message to us and was being on the agenda for the board.
Okay, I missed that. Yeah, thank you. Okay. Very good. Next, capital budgets. You provided some, let's go along with it.
Alrighty, we'll probably start with the electric, go electric fiber, and then she's making some copies for water that we to distribute. So I will kind of start by saying, yeah, Mike and I developed this capital plan. You'll see the items of note certainly for the 2022-2023 year are the directional boring equipment.
That's for one piece of equipment.
No,
You know, it's multiple.
That's for everything that we need to, that includes two bore rigs, one larger one, smaller one. Includes another back. Includes another truck to be able to pull, to help us just get more built, and then as well as portable air compressor to be able to low strength through the duct to be able to pull the cable. So yeah, there's several pieces of equipment that's wrapped up.
And would we have as much trouble getting this equipment as we are?
So as part of that, that's a great question. Talking through some of the vendors, I know the vendor that assisted me get budget numbers said come April, their numbers are going to go up 3%, and they anticipate before the first year they're going to go up another 3% across the board.
When you say numbers are pricing.
Yeah. So and I'm hearing that across the board, but all vendors they're going up as well. But yeah, if we ordered it now, we could possibly have this by fall or next winter. We get that equipment right now.
I think the big differentiation, in discussing with some other utilities that have those, this was following some of their advice. I think a lot of people oversimplification, but I mean, there's a small rig, a medium, and a large one. A lot of people say, hey, let's pick the medium, and that'll be great because it'll just a little bit bigger than small and smaller than big. It was kind of common to hear that as a little bit of a regret that the medium one's exactly not right for everything. And hearing a little feedback from them that they wish they would have gone with a small bore rig or small piece of equipment where that's necessary. And certainly we need something that's available to do larger equipment for any of those larger primary type of bores. And it's two pieces of equipment, but it's nice to have the right piece of equipment for the job.
So what's
rather
the
than making
life
something
cycle on this type of equipment?
It depends on maintenance, which care, like you have options as you purchase it, you can get longer warranties, maintenance programs with them. As part of that, I didn't include that in any of the costs right now. It could be 10 years, 12 years, it all depends on how everything, we try to maintain our equipment. When it breaks, we try to fix it and not try to get
So
by.
with good luck, we'd be able to use this equipment to get us through the majority of our
It gets through a large portion of it, I would say.
Does electric have a boring machine now?
We don't have one,
But fiber does, right?
no.
No, not like this. We've got a unit that'll get across driveways or underneath driveways, but that's about it. So nothing like this. So
I'd be on a mini size versus
Yeah.
the medium.
So like what Kurt has is it's I call it a roto witch, which is just goes underneath and you hope it gets through and it comes up the right spot. With ours, it has electronic devices on it, so the operator can control elevations and left to right to make sure you're going over and under things at long distances. So we're talking, we're probably going 500 feet at a time with one of these pieces of equipment.
So then would Kurt's crews be able to use
I would say.
it also, or it's strictly would be for electrical?
So I would say operation wise, it would stick within our department. Now, if Kurt needs a board or somebody needs a board that, whatever help that piece of equipment, we'd be able to schedule that in the
right now I go out to external contractors to do that for us. So, just in the past year, I've had 3 or 4 bore crews in doing, and the balloon field was one. things like that, sort of thing that this could do as well, so.
So it really depends on the job, the size of the job. is what you're saying.
So,
Okay, you blew us away with the first one. Keep going down your list.
So, do you want to go on across then, or? I'd like to at least talk to one more for under vehicles if I could, because it's kind of out there. So 350,000 and 24, 25 for the digger derrick crane. The reason I really want to point that out is as I work through the vendors on that, they're talking 26 months if I order it today to get that piece of equipment.
Are they specially made or
they're
they just
just-
don't keep our
So
inventory?
ultimately, right now,
What is that? Like,
that's a digger derrick or a crane. It's the way we can lift our transformers. And I'm really moving towards, we've got 2 digger derricks and they're, so we can do poles, transformers, set poles with them. My thought was the diggers that we have right now, some of our largest transformers, it won't pick it up. They're just too big for it. So we're taking a look at whether or not we just go with a crane as an option and not do with the digger part of it. But there's some things we need to look at right now when they throw that 26 month, there's out there that throws everything in the tailspin. I can tell you that our what we had in the budget last year for those same pieces of equipment have gone up again. It just
quite a bit.
So if we
Well,
order
I-
it
I
now, we
consider-
don't, if we order it now, we don't deliver until 26, 24, 25. Do we pay for it now?
No, we would, but the only thing we maybe have to pay for is the chassis, but I think my understanding is if we order the chassis through them, they prorate that out to the schedule, so they only get the chassis when they need it, when it comes time to assemble it onto the box or the boom onto that.
So this really would be an expense for 24, 25.
It'd be an expense for 24, 25, but it'd be one of those commitments that if we go out for bid right now or come up with a spec, then we would be committing 2 years from now to be paying for that.
But we get it at the price now.
That's my understanding. We'd have to make sure that's part of the.
Part of the agreement is-
agreement.
I
I
don't
want
know
to
how they
double
do
check
that.
on that.
No,
if they're mounting that on a truck chassis and they have no idea what's gonna happen in those truck rides, we know they're not gonna go down.
No. And the problem is what the vendors are telling me, the reason why they're seeing them go out so long is because of the lead times. And so there's a lot of people out there that typically buy 10 or 12 trucks a year. They're doubling those orders right now because they're just afraid of the time to get those trucks. And they're behind really. So they're really flooding the market.
So along the same lines, going back to what you were talking about with pickups. So pickups is not on this list for 22, 23, even though that's likely when we will get them.
They're in 21, 22. I'm hoping we're still going to get those this year. If not, we'll have to do an amendment. My plan is still to get them within this budget.
So you think we still will get them before June?
He seems to think we will, but we were also supposed to have them by Thanksgiving. So we'll see. Right now, I'd like to kind of keep that money in there so that additional the money continues to be in there for work.
And if it doesn't, one item that we haven't necessarily, traditionally done is those continuing appropriations where we come in and subtract it out of this year's budget and then add it to, it's a net zero over time, but we would just, remove it from our existing budget and add it to whatever year to where it'll actually land.
You want to just keep going?
Yep.
Okay. So under turbine specialized equipment.
Can we jump back?
Yeah.
Dump truck, what kind of dump truck can you get for 80 grand?
Well, right now, with the prices of everything that we're seeing on the escalation, we are budgeting out for expectation, what they're gonna be at that point right now.
I'm just saying, to me, 80 grand for a dump truck doesn't seem like a lot of money.
They're 450,
These are small,
4,500.
these are not.
Small single
these are
axle
Small
dump.
single axle.
Okay.
Yep. Yeah,
Okay.
like a 450 or 550. Yep. Any other questions on vehicles?
No.
Okay. Under
It's not often
turbines.
we tell you that, doesn't sound like enough.
Yeah, I know, I was like, oh, that's different. No, we're good. Under turbines, for next year, proposing that we start engineering for turbine 8 controls. We did turbine 7 controls here 4 or 5 years ago when we were forced to do those controls when they totally failed. we're looking at, that's, those turbine controls were put in 2020 or 2000. So we're 22 years in already on those controls. So they definitely need to be updated. So 80,000 towards engineering, and then go out for bids, and the estimate is 800,000 to change those controls out for that turbine following year. And then we've also got the 69 transmission relays for East Iowa stuff the following year, 360,000. And then we're all the way back to the next year, our SCADA controls. By the time we get to there, those controls will be 7 to 8 years old, all that electronic equipment, be time to update all that.
We did those.
What's that?
Seems like we just did those.
Well, it's crazy, isn't it? Time flies, but yeah, we did. Yeah, by the time we get to that point into the budget, it'll be close to 7, 8 years once we complete that. It's kind of the high points as far as the turbines. Questions underneath that? Otherwise, we'll move down through customer pay.
Mike, excuse me,
Yeah.
do we still have the Lost in Space room over there at the old building?
Oh, yes, it's still there. All that's there. Do you know anybody who wants it?
But we're not utilizing that today, is what you.
We still have to heat that because there's still some pumps in there in the basement because we can't afford to have anything freeze down in there. Fill the basement up full of water or anything like that.
But because we had electric, I remember way back, and then we had those controls there, and I didn't know.
We still have those. We still have the big console that's in there that we can control from as well. And then we've also got switch gear is down tied to that building as well for everything out of our downtown substation.
And is that there for a reason?
As far as
Why is it? Yeah, why is it not
the
moved?
switch gear? It's the over millions of dollars to move all that equipment, and that's part of that goes back to the directional boring and wanting to go like to the south side of Highway 92 that we've engineered out to be able to take load off that substation, so we could try to work our way through to get rid of that substation at some point. So yeah, we're trying to design around to get rid of it.
That was officially called as Lost in Space.
Well, I don't know. What else do you call that? I mean, that's kind of what it looks like.
Yeah, we call it the downtown plant. Refer to it as
Need to tour the downtown plant, Lori.
Yeah.
Well, and we had talked, I mean, certainly one of the items that's not addressed here is, we've got a lot, at some point we need to discuss what we're gonna do with that downtown plant. And so I don't know if you guys wanna maybe take tours and we can go through things individually or get ambitious. And it's something else that it's not necessarily on one of these 5-year, plans or projects, but that is that's an outstanding item that we're gonna need to do something with at some point.
next item we have is customer pay material. What that is people that come in and do developments. It's in there as a placeholder that they pay us, and ultimately it's a money in, money out situation on that. So that we have the expense on the other side where we check that material out to those certain projects. Transmission facilities, that's our all of our transmission lines between here and Patterson. We've got that little bit of increase in there every year to accommodate any kind of material increases, labor increases. That gives us roughly 8 to 10 poles a year to change out at today's prices.
So that was why I asked you on here recently, right?
Yep, it's part of our capital project.
Yeah.
And that goes back to our annual inspection of that transmission line. If we try to find any of the worst ones or deteriorating ones, they get on our list to be scheduled to be replaced as part of that. Project 700, it's every now and then it's one of those projects that kind of takes off, and we'll see a big rush, and then all of a sudden not as many. But what that is somebody that's existing overhead electric service that wants to go underground will contribute up to $700 towards that project, or 50% of it up to $700 for that homeowner to go from overhead So sometimes it helps those customers make a decision like, yeah, we'll go ahead and go underground. Makes a lot of sense. And definitely for us as we move forward and converting the town from overhead to underground, if those services are already converted to underground, makes it a lot easier for us to make those switchovers. Line construction, the major line replacement that takes care of, our typical, somebody comes in, does a development, we need to finish our portion of it, where to extend it on into the development or tie a loop around. That's where that funding typically comes from. Also put in there the K Street and Hillcrest Street projects that are coming up. We just got the plans on that last week or the end of the week, or actually it was the end of the week, about 10 days ago, 14 days ago, something like that. I just didn't have enough time really to go to the engineer to really look at that. But what I did do is allow, I don't think would be to the point where we have to do anything. Those projects, my understanding, are going to be bid out this fall into next winter for the following next year's construction. So by the time they get to us and we need to do something, we're probably into that 23, 24.
So spring of 23, you're thinking?
That we do that, but we're gonna, as they move forward with that, I've got some money in there to help cover engineering costs for both projects for them to design and decide what we want to do with those projects.
That's the 50 and the 25.
That's what the 50, 25 or inch
Yeah.
to cover engineering.
Yeah.
And then those are the following year, those are just estimated. There's definitely more workforce due on the K Street project compared to the Hillcrest project. I believe on K Street, as I look through that project, there's 32 poles that will be part or encased inside that project. About 20 of those we'd have to relocate or move in that project. So
we wouldn't take overhead to underground with this process.
So that's one thing we look at with the engineer. What are, K Street would be a tough one to decide what we want to do. There's so many things on the east side of the road that's undeveloped, or there's more distances in between single homes. I know there's been people that have looked at properties through there to develop, and nobody's went yet. But once we go underground, it's trying to anticipate where we need that equipment and have it in the right spot to be able to tie into it later. That's the one kind of it is kind of a guessing game at that point.
Mike, is under the underground conversion, is that including streetscape?
So that next 22 through 24, that's all mainly the downtown and what that covers mainly is the duct banks, to get the duct banks, conduit duct banks in around the square. That doesn't include wire transformers, converting the businesses over, cutting them over as part of that.
So
Where's that?
So we don't know right now. Once we get that in, we can push that off into a later date or whatever. I don't have that in there yet because I don't have those numbers to know. We've got to get the conduit and that stuff in before we really can know where we're going to hit down the road.
Shouldn't we have some kind of a placeholder or something in there?
Sure can.
Because we anticipate we know there's gonna be a cost.
Yeah.
And to not account for anything, I don't know.
And if you kind of look at, down at the bottom, you look at those totals, we've kind of left, you'll notice kind of a fall off between the 23 and 24 and 24 and 25. We're kind of creating a budget that's going to sustain those, that, 2.75 million range. There's obviously some gap there, on stuff that we didn't have an exact number or we left some off, but there is, we're anticipating room in those future years. Some in 24, 25 and a lot more in 25, 26, 27.
I agree with Mike though. I think we need to put that number in there, even if it's a gas.
Okay. We can do that. Any other questions on line construction?
So we can even make a notation on that, put an asterisk up next to it, so just a wild ass guess, or just have, yeah.
So an underground conversion number, is that enough? So for 3 years, that streetscape, did I hear you correct?
For 2 through 23, 24, and then right now with us going in to do, it is kind of a placeholder right now to know when we go into certain areas are going to cost us more money to go in and do. Some areas maybe won't be. It depends on what equipment we have to do and how many. So right now it's kind of a placeholder right now to see, but almost $750,000. That's a lot of material. So it just all depends on what the material prices do, if we get them to come back down.
So what about, so if we move forward with, and I think we are based on strategic planning, but with this moving everything to underground, you're gonna have to hire additional staff to do all this work. That's not included in this, right?
So Chris and I had a discussion about that today as well. My intentions right now is to start this off with the existing staff that we have.
Okay.
And hopes to get going, see how it goes, make sure to see if we can do it with the existing staff we have. And then if we need, we've got placeholders in for the future to add additional staff should we need it, but I don't want to bring them in. If we buy the equipment right now, I don't want to bring them in right away because I've got time that we.
We won't have it for 2 years.
Right, it's gonna take some time.
Will
So
they be full-time employees or will it just be
They would-
through the gap?
it'd be a full-time employee, and then ultimately, my idea is down the road, if it gets to be where you don't need more, you could, eliminate that position through retirement or something like that down the road.
And all of that would be accounted for in the operating budget, not in the capital budget.
Correct.
But we don't have any movements. There's no additional staff in, this next year. So it's the 23, 24 and beyond where we're, once we have that piece of equipment and the existing staff have been trained on that and see how it works and what the time commitments are involved.
And this goes back to our cash to accrual question or discussion. But those staff that we would hire to do the underground conversion, is that something that that staff time be capitalized as part of our plant cost?
There's probably a opportunity for that. Where we were going specifically with this was kind of a shared and rotational staff.
So you're not gonna have staff dedicated to it, you're gonna rotate them?
I'm gonna train everybody on it.
Yeah.
All the alignment.
How long would you carry that capitalization out?
Same as the wire that you're putting in the ground, that's part of the 700,000.
Probably would once.
I think there's some opportunity. We hadn't intended to do anything with that just because we're gonna keep with everyone, I think it would be easier if there was just we hired you and you're dedicated and this is your job and going forward.
And I think that's more what I was thinking, but I understand that where it's coming from. Okay. So Mike, just to go back to my question, so the 600,000 plus the 700,000, is that streetscape?
That is correct.
And then the years after that is just continuing with the moving everything to underground.
Correct.
And you think that's enough? I'm surprised it's not more than that.
Well, I'm hoping that it's gonna be one of those deals where I don't wanna overestimate it either. I'd rather get in that first year and see, and then we can project it out more, but, right now it's just it's ultimately it's a guess at this point to say how much material we're gonna need, because I don't know how many feet we're gonna be able to bore at a time, or, until we get that equipment here, we start actually using it.
Ultimately, those numbers were kind of estimated in the 735 one. We looked at the current material cost in that project that we use those engineers' estimates and their thought that basically we talked about in the strategic planning, but that particular project that they engineer out was about 4 crew years worth of dollars, and that came out to about $750,000 a year as we took that current equipment process. Certainly, there's some inflationary risk that we're not.
And you've got an escalation factor in there, which I think makes sense.
Yeah, attempted to do that, but ultimately, it was approximately 700,000 in current annual year dollars, based upon those engineering estimates. We're starting with that, and again, when we have the crews in here and we have the years and we can see what we can accomplish, we'll make refinements later, but I think that's the best estimated information we have for right now.
And then, so setting aside the escalation factor, is that number in there for 20 years and then we have this project done and it goes away, or will it just have to continue carrying forward? To keep
Right now,
replacing?
as much as I'd love to say there's a dead end. complete date, I just don't know where it is because there's so many variables that come up, different projects that pop up, so, where we have to change gears and go, if we don't have as many developments and we're not putting in as much underground, which I can tell this year, that we're probably into fall already before we do just the developments we've got. But if I've got not only one crew dedicated to boring or whatever one I set up, my hope is to take that other crew, if we don't have them dedicated to another new development or something else, I'm gonna have them doing part of that boring as well. So we're, maximize our resources when we can. They may be going ahead of them, using the backs to, pothole utilities or whatever to try to save time and move things along quicker. So that's kind of where the unknown comes in. I just don't know with our other day-to-day schedules, what other things pop up and come along. Big variable.
Yeah, over time, probably in theory that it doesn't go away, but once there's conduits and we can reuse and repull wire, those amounts go down. But history will tell you that there'll be 5 digging accidents over the next 20 years that involve crushing that piece of conduit, and so it'll probably have to be rebored through there, items like that. So in theory it exists in perpetuity, just at a lesser amount, but I think in practice they'll will even beyond 20 years still be using this piece of equipment a lot for various reasons.
And so, Mike, moving forward, I just want to make sure that we're not cutting ourselves too thin personnel wise.
Sure.
Because my guess is your guys think they're doing a full-time job right now.
Yeah,
and where they're gonna be cross-trained in other things that can potentially pull them away from other stuff. And
Sure. And so where part of that is right now we do the IUB inspections on our distribution system overhead and underground, where those crews have been going out, putting that stuff in overhead or replacing poles. That's my hopes, that have those employees, instead of replacing overhead poles, that they're actually putting that in underground instead in those areas.
all right. So instead of doing the poles, we're digging.
Yeah, not to say, and I don't want any misconception that we're never going to set a pole, because we're going to
Right.
actually set poles again in places.
And there also could come a time down the road, a couple, 3 years, where you may need to add some staff.
When we do, and we've got the placeholder that we've got
Yeah.
at least one staff to bring on to help that. Yep. Any other questions under land construction? Go ahead, do you? Okay.
No, I was waiting for Mike.
Oh, okay. Streetlight replacement. This is part of our high pressure sodium to LED conversions that we've been doing around town. You can see that does fall off where we've got the majority of the town converted from that over to the LEDs.
So Mike, does that include, you talked about some of the light poles, does that include the replacement of poles as well?
That doesn't include pole, that just includes the light itself.
Because the city covers the pole cost. right?
Oh,
Yes.
okay.
Well, yeah, and to clarify on that, we get $3 per light to go towards maintenance of us maintaining those lights. So that money then is put back into capital to do the replacement. So they ultimately take care of the lights, but that's taken care of in the $3 maintenance. Building maintenance, that's just our building out there. That's our upgrade, fixing things that we got going out there. Like I say, right now, a majority of that has been added concrete around the facility to get rid of all the rock that we deal with out there. We've been doing that in-house, trying to save some money as well. The guys have been doing a really good job with that. Software that comes up to our computers, any computers that we may need, comes up with any of our meter reading equipment that comes up to take care of those pieces of equipment.
$1,000 covers that.
We try to space it out to take care of. It just depends on what we want or what we need, so. And we've gone to also save some money, where we used to have a lot of laptops, like rough type books in the trucks. We've gone to Surfaces, which are a little bit more user friendly. We've had better luck with those. And then radio read meters, that's a continuing, going to be forever number in there. That's our electric meters that we go out. They got the radios in. They're a 10 to 15 year meter, and they just automatically roll out and change them out every 10 years. They're 10 to 15. And there's an escalator in there. That's another one that we've been seeing costs seem to keep going up. I don't know what part in there that's causing that, but there's evidently parts in there that the vendors keep saying is increasing it.
What about solar? If we do the field and have to do the cost to connect.
So I believe that's, I should have brought that up there under major line replacement. That was up a little bit. That was some money for this year to accommodate for some.
So that's in the 200.
Yeah.
Well, but that's not leaving us a lot. You were originally saying like 100, 120, and now you're saying that's not enough. It was like 150 or more.
So one thing that we worked with on the solar guys is that was on them a little bit about the secondary voltage that they were using. It's a little bit odd for us. Not necessarily is it odd for the industry, but for a lot of us here in Iowa, it's an odd voltage secondary that not everybody's got those sitting around. So I talked to them, and they're working on trying to get 480 volt on the secondary side. If they do that, I actually got spare 480 volt transformers sitting in our lot to help us with those costs, so we don't have to buy a third transformer.
Thank you, Mike. Good work. Who's next? Are you next?
Actually filled me out and scanned one of these capitals for Leslie, so everyone has the information in front of them.
Hey Lou, after the meeting, would you send a copy of that to me?
Yes, I will.
Thank you.
Leslie, I actually emailed it to your IndianoIowa.gov account and your Gmail account, so you should have it now.
Oh, I should? Okay, I'll check.
Jackie.
All right, starting with the plant here for this year, we're, like I say, we're 23, 24 years old, so we've got SCADA upgrades, 4 filters, those upgrades coming up here in the next 3 to 4 years. The plant facility roof, it's, a big facility, and we got one section we'll probably be doing, and then the other not leaking, but I put some out, to be prepared for that, which we know it's a 25-year roof estimated life.
Is that a steel roof that you have on that? What type
No,
of-
it is a rubber roof over the side of the walls with pea gravel over the top of it. And there's a few spots where here and there in the facility where you can tell it's got wet. It doesn't drip, but it's one of those things where we're trying to stay ahead, and instead of being reactive, be proactive. So that's just, oh, sorry.
So you've got 125,000. That's actually this year, right?
Yep.
And then you got in 23, 24, you got 100,000. So are you doing pieces at a time?
Yeah, doing sections. Most of the time, what I was told was that it would be it wouldn't be a quick fix if they had to tear off and redo it, that kind of thing, or yeah, because of the style where it's glued down and then, you know, heated and that kind of thing.
So doing sections should be preferred, is
Yes.
what I'm hearing you say.
Yes,
Okay.
yeah, kind of space out there. The water tower maintenance, you know, that's also, you know, a spring to fall type project for our two towers. So I've got, you know, 100,000 in each, the next, or not, start next year, to take care of the two towers in two different, you know, budget years. There, excuse me, or actually it's 4 by the time you get done. And then the plan upgrades, you know, we talked about that the other night in our strategic planning, how it's, there's a lot of things that we've done real well since 97, and, you know, big line items, you know, on the upgrades, the big lime silo, you know, our pH adjustment, CO2 tank, the backup generator, which the, you know, DNR is saying we really need to have. We use the turbines as our backup generator, but they're telling me no on that. So we're looking at numbers and won't get that prepared for that. And, you know, as far as getting the risk and resiliency plan, that's been completed. We don't know the upgrades. We're still looking into hopefully getting some recovery money for that as far as.
What is that, Lou? I'm not familiar.
That's our security upgrades that they initiated through the nation. You know, making sure you have your cameras and your fencing and your
Somebody thinks they can do something.
yeah, security driven for the well sites and the treatment
So
facility.
that's risk.
Yeah, that's the risk. Yeah.
So you said there's grant money available?
They're it's projected. We're hoping to get in line with that. It hasn't started yet, but we had to have the plan intact and our plan initiated and formalized with our needs stuff. So we got it.
How do you apply for that?
They, working with Feaster and Kim, they've done some work with some bigger cities that have already done it. We're in the second phase, and they
So they'll help with that application?
yep, they'll help with that. So
This
next,
was the risk and results was a required expenditure. You know, we approved that some time back. It was a mandate that we had to spend some money on. Trustees approved that, and
I remember that now. I just don't remember it being referred to as risk and resilience.
yeah. The Clearwell, you know, we had the company come in from the state of Washington, the scuba divers, and they went in with their 20,000 leagues under the sea camera and took all these pictures and vacuumed everything and stuff. And then it was we got tape and pictures and what stuff we're going to have to address, but they were like, you know, gave us 95, 96, 8%, looking really good. But 5-6 years down the road, we're going to readdress that, excuse me, and probably put some money into it. You know, it's my thoughts on that 700,000 gallon tank out there west of the facility there that we pump up to go to the towers. Otherwise, you know, we have, you know, our 3 backwash pumps and our 3 high service pumps. We've got, I left out a year there just because my numbers at the bottom you can see are pretty high, and I'm trying to, you know, it is what it is on that. We're gonna do that. And then our wells, you know, that's usually split between, usually you can't take a well out because it's so deep and put it back in within one budget frame. Usually, you know, that's a spring to fall type situation too. So each of the 4 wells are budgeted out there on each period. You know, and we're always doing the gate valves and hydrants, working on them, you know, in the system, having, you know, 900 some hydrants and, you know, over 1,400 gate valves. So we've got money in there to that next line item there. And then, you know, like we talked in the strategic planning meeting the other day, the next 2 years out, it's all streetscape, all that money's, you know, we might not spend 600,000 this year. But the reason we don't is if they get rain or get, find bolts or whatever they did on that first phase that slowed them way down. They have that situation again, then that money would be shifted to the next year. Instead of 300,000 to finish up, it might be 400,000 or 450, that kind of thing. Get it out there. And then the other years there, the last three are all personal areas that are high maintenance for us and have been on our want and wish list for years. And we're gonna, have.
So those have not necessarily been coordinated with the city in terms of their plans.
A couple of them have, but the city has with the K Street and Hillcrest Street projects, they're huge. So they pushed all of their, with the exception of the West Clinton, Howard to Buxton, which is now on this year's. So with the exception of that, the other ones, they pushed back. So, right now, outside of our 5-year capital plan, okay? They're there, North C Street, Lincoln Street, different ones that are going to be in need of repair. Their wish and want list that pushed them back. So otherwise, those are all, and then this is just to put out the 5 years. I mean, we've got a wish and want list way beyond that too.
So Lou, how does your wish and want list compare with what this is?
We're like say in the next 2 years, the streetscape. So we'll be getting rid of about 3/4 mile of over 100-year-old 4-inch main. So our fire protection around the square is going to increase a bunch off the square block plus the square, which is a good thing. And because we'll, have the bigger mains in them areas. Otherwise, it's just we're flexible. These mains that I'm putting down here, they're 70, 80 years old, and the streets are fine on most of them. So it's not like the areas we're having problems with isn't coordinating with the area where the wastewater and the streets have problems right now. But that could change. If it does, then we shift up, do those, and then shift ours down. Okay.
So what I'm hearing you say is you don't have anything that's not on this list that's in a real bad state at this point.
That I don't have. What?
You don't have on your list, you don't have streets that need to be addressed. that aren't on-
Right. That's not on, with the exception, excuse me, Lori, with the exception of this year's downtown streetscape, then West Clinton. That is a part of the square between Howard Street and Buxton. It's pretty rough and it needs some
But it will
repair.
be, that's part of the plan to be addressed here.
Yeah, we're going to address it here this year.
And
as
that
part-
one's on your list.
Yeah,
of high need.
yeah. And then we got a couple other ones here that they could shift up and then we'll have to just but they'll give us time. But right now, they've been the last meeting we had combined, like Mike had mentioned, the K Street and the Hillcrest Avenue, making that 3 lanes instead of 2. Those are 2 pretty big projects. And the only thing that'll affect us on like the Hillcrest project is they'll want us to help with moving the fence and taking the road in. We share a drive with the
Lou, are
company.
you talking to Hillcrest on the west end of town, east end of town, out to the industrial park?
Right.
Okay.
It's
And they're gonna
from
make that
4th
3
Street.
lanes?
Yeah, or from 4th Street on in, it's 3 lanes, but you go from 4th Street all the way to 14th. Thank you, Jack. Yes, it is 14th. And then now there's a potential, I was called, Snyder and Associates called me the Friday and said there's a potential big new customer east of 14th and Hillcrest that might need a turning lane for their vehicles and trucks and whatnot getting in it. So it might extend even further. So, but that's now just in the planning stages, or, they've been approached by them. So it's not ever changing, but we've got, like say, the next 2 years, we're locked in up there on the streetscape. And otherwise, like Mike had said, for us, we started 25 years ago putting in these radio receivers, so we wouldn't have to, and now we're finding each month they just stop. And as we go out, I'm starting out, next couple of years, 100,000, then I'm ramping it up to 200 to 300. Because as we get into those future years, we were doing, 300-400 meters a year, and they're at the end of their lifespan. So we'll have to be replacing them at plus, we think. And a couple of years there, we did over 500, with the 5,700 meters, and they all got to be replaced eventually, and it's ongoing.
Lou,
Yes.
excuse me. Explain to me again how, I guess I don't understand how we can push off, what is it, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 different areas for another, 4 years?
Well, Leslie, since the streetscape project came up, we're spending a lot of money there to get, and so we started into that, so it's a done deal, so we got to finish them first, and that's a lot of money, so. Right.
Those could be part of this list.
Oh, yes, they are, and like I say, we're gonna get rid of some 4-inch, 100-year-old water main, and we're gonna, put it all to 8,
Plus
so.
you also increase the ability to hire. Right?
Oh, absolutely, a bunch. Greg Chia actually says, finally, Lou, he'd like it all to have 8, 10-inch mains with fire hydrants that'll flow 3,000 gallon a minute. It's not going to be this cat that's going to be doing that, but somebody, eventually will. But
So there's the potential then that 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 areas in town, if they're that old, could need to be fixed.
well, yeah, well, we're having this is most of these areas that we have here, not most, excuse me, all these areas here that are marked out as far as a need for the water department, Leslie, have several failures, and they're some water mains, can last 100 years and we don't touch it. But these 7 sections here that I've wrote down, some longer than others, have been very costly for the water utility to keep in the system. And we're just wanting to keep at getting out the old and costly ones and putting in new.
Well, and I just can't help but notice too that in 2024-25, you're addressing 2 of those areas for $500,000. I mean, how much have we spent already on streetscape?
Well, we've only got 1 block done. Let's say we got 9 more blocks to go on streetscape. So we've the 399,000. We spent 114,000 on streetscape, and then the next. So there's another 100,000 in this in case they do get something done in March and submit an invoice for us. And then after that, then the next 2 years will be, I'm figuring right at that 900,000 to get that. Okay. And those numbers have already been, helpfully, that's just what the company that's doing it said, this is what your cost is on the project, that kind of thing. So.
Okay, now what about change orders? Do we pay those, or does who pays all the change orders?
We've already had a change order on the first one, and they'll be on this second phase. There'll be 4 change orders already, just because the water main in the alley behind Kraus Cafe and that has those great big vaults from the phone company there. Plus, Mike has his overhead that needs to go down below underground at some point in time. So there was really, I needed to get out of the way. So we're, why that street's out, we're gonna pay to have them, which is not in the contract, do those 4 extra buildings that, Kraus Cafe, the Mishmash, the tax place, and the First of Indianola sales, or I can't remember what's called.
Oh,
The real
innovation, the real estate.
The real estate
Real estate.
building. So those 4 are not in the contract and will be, I've talked to them, they're gonna do that. Because they all go in the alley. Everything goes in the alley. It's just crazy.
So how much is that going to cost?
I think they said they'd be good about, because the street's gonna be out of their way, but I, they couldn't give me solid numbers yet. But I'm sure it'll probably be, an average tap is 3,000. So 3,000 to 4,000 if they're gonna be drilling through the basement wall and coming in, and then, I'd have to say it'd probably be an easy between $15,000 and $20,000 hit. But it's not really a hit because we knew that we were going to do it. Because we had Streetscape that you guys approved there last fall, Streetscape 2, to take care of that alleyway, like say, because it's the fact that we've never had any problems, and we can't with those bolts and the gas main and the stuff in the way. It's crazy crowded back there. So we're gonna eliminate that, but that's why, Leslie, it's just like say, this first couple of years, we're locked on that, and then we're gonna aggressively or more aggressively go after the others.
And Lou, this is all same pricing, then we don't have any, this isn't projecting any increases or anything?
A little bit, but I'm hoping that it ain't just keeps going. It did go up some this last year. And we talked about that, with every community getting that American Recovery money, your good contractors like, hey, people are calling us, wanting us to do these jobs. So they're not sharpening their pencil. So the bids are a little bit higher. So we're getting through with the American Recovery money. I'm hoping things get somewhat back to, not too outrageous, but that's the thing about that. And we'll find out here in 3 weeks. They're going to go out for bid on Boston, and we'll see what that kind of bid comes back. That's all American Recovery project there.
Answered my question.
What's that, Mike?
Answered my question, I wasn't thinking right,
Okay.
sometimes I have.
So on the numbers, they all are, as you see, have increased quite dramatically by the end of the 5 years. And, the next 2 were locked. And then after that, we'll have to seriously readdress, what kind of numbers we're talking about more. Like you say, things are going to go up, but for me to project 5 years out, it's just a guess.
Chris, to accommodate these numbers, is there an assumption that there will be a water rate increase, or are we not to that yet?
We have gone through the O&M, and I mean, we talked about a lot of this is going up, that's going up. We're seeing that a lot on the operational side. I think it's realistic to assume that we'll see a rate increase. We're not done with everything yet to be able to talk numbers yet, but in order to accomplish this, and certainly out this 5-year plan, rates are involved.
Yeah, and part of our discussion too was we're hoping to get things not in a hurry, but in a speed. I really don't want to raise rates when it comes in the summer when everybody's using a lot more water. I would like to get it done here in March or April, in these first few bills where they're somewhat normal before they start using the water. That's just a tentative plan.
So we normally raise electric rates in December, but you're wanting to do water. It's like all of that.
Well, we sure could use the money, that's for sure. So it's a given. Things are, we're going to need it. Yeah, 10 years. So we've done it. Yeah. But
So on the computer software, that's already been done.
yeah, I'm sorry. I should have taken that last one out. I don't think there's going to be anything big in that. Chris and I, Longer and I talked about that. We don't foresee it, but maybe I'll probably later on if they're, it's hard to say with, what we got there. So that's all I got.
Look at on our planning session that we talked about getting a map.
Yes.
When can we see that?
The next meeting, I'll have a map and I'm trying to get it to where it's not so small that you can't read it. That's the problem with,
Or so big that we can carry it home.
or yeah, if I put it on the screen and show you, because, we have a training room and in there we've got, we put in a TV and we have it's really something, showing where the main brakes are, and where the stop box are, and we have gate valves, and I'm happy with it. It's a good system. I get it.
Great, thank you.
Kurt's turn.
Cool. Yeah, 2080 capital contribution. These are the capital improvements we do up at CFU for the television equipment. They have it scheduled next year to upgrade the border guard, which is the encryption software server that takes care of all the encryption for the TV services. That's why you're seeing a jump there. There will be dollars out in 25, 26, 26, 27. They do not budget out that far just because TV changes so quickly. So, but don't think that there won't be any dollars spent there, but they just don't forecast out
I
that
would
far.
say
So.
put a plug number in there. Put a number
Yeah,
in
we
there.
could plug in the 45, just bring it across if we want, so. Outside plant improvements, service drops, kind of in line with what we've done here the last few years, down just a little bit, because I expect a few fewer installs. The big thing is the outside plant expansion, which we'll talk about here a little bit later. But that's at $1.75 million. That includes all the NOFA, that gets started on the NOFA 7 areas, which is the state grant funding, census blocks, and then the Pell transport route. Like I said, we'll talk a little more detail about that here in a bit. IPTV equipment, that's set-top boxes, remotes, Mochas, things like that. We're not buying any more set-top boxes, but we'll still have to replace some remotes, Mocha devices, things along those lines. Customer prem equipment, this includes ONTs, things along those lines. We are seeing price increases in those, so that 100,000 would be somewhere between 350 and 400 new installs for the 23-24 year. Core network equipment, that's all your transport switches, servers, routers, things like that. We will need to be doing updates to the transport switch one way or the other. Again, we'll talk about that a little more in detail here in a bit. But that's why a big jump there. We will have to replace that piece of gear next year. So there it is in a very, very quick nutshell.
Really, Kurt, you're done after just 1 minute.
You understand, I've got all this to talk about later, so we still got an hour here, so.
Kurt, we appreciate it.
I try.
And I didn't even have to make any signs to
Oh, yes.
it.
So Kurt, is it still running according to the business plan that we had laid out originally?
Yeah, it is. Obviously, we're ahead of the business plan, which again, I've got some numbers for you to show you here in a bit. Which means, I really didn't expect to have to replace this transport switch quite this early, but because of the number of customers we have on, it's reached its capacity. We're going to have to do something with it. So, yeah. So, but yeah, otherwise, yeah, we're kind of right in line where we thought we would be. So.
And this is what year of your plan?
This would be 5, 6, yeah.
And you're ending in 22.
Yeah, we started at 18, so.
Okay, lots of good information on capital budget. Any other questions before we move on?
Well, just thanks for your work in those.
Yeah.
Thank you, guys.
Okay, in other business, before we consider going into closed session, is there anything else that, Chris, any other informational topics you need to update us on?
We have, since our last meeting, we met as the main board of directors met and voted on rates for next year. Our wholesale rate is going up 6%. So again, we're still working through all the implications. I think I sent you guys out the anticipated as we talked through and worked out some of the future projections that did end up being, I think, the best rate for me. We're going to get that information incorporated into our own budgets, and next we'll talk about that. I think we'll see some
effects or items we'll have to adjust on our side because of that. We have a couple of other items. The Iowa Association of Municipal Utilities has filed a lawsuit against the Iowa Utilities Board. And they're challenging some of the late fee restrictions as well as some notice restrictions that shouldn't really affect us. We have traditionally posted notices in excess of that 30 days. There's some items that are unclear on that, on what exactly do we have to send out a standalone mailing or electronic mailing, or can we use our build provisions? There's some items with regard to that certainly support IAMU on their ventures to keep restrictions off the municipal utilities that are probably undue and burdensome. If either of those go either way, it's not going to, it'll not tremendously affect us.
So when will that be finalized? When they will be notified?
I don't know. I know they filed those injunction stuff. The legal process.
Could it be this year? Could it be years out? Is it-
Depending on the level of significance that a judge would see in it, they might put this on the hot seat and take it through. And if they don't view it as a priority, it could be years out. So the other item, again, that IAMU has made us aware of that may affect us a little more in the near term. There's some rumored solar siting regulations. The item that's coming out of that are discussions over in Lynn County right now that they're working on a bill that would require a 1,250-foot setback off of a residential home. If that bill were to move forward, IAEMU says that it would effectively end utility scale solar projects in Iowa. So we're watching that, certainly given we're involved in this current project, that puts a little extra level of unsure at the future if this project doesn't go forward, or if we don't reach a milestone in approving, regulations could come that could stop us from that in the
So
future.
what's driving? What would be the reason for?
I won't venture to guess publicly. I mean, there's some information we have I can kind of fill you in, but
It's just curious when solar seems to be such a hot topic right now, why they would come in
and that's probably some of that. The regulations are with farm ground, and it's particularly related because of our project. It's solar installations on farm ground.
So what do we do then, or what do we do to, I mean, for something like that, I would say that we as a community would want to be opposed to that. So how can we support them in that effort?
Certainly when the IAMU is aware of it, and once a bill gets proposed or introduced, or definitely with a bill number that we can help distribute out to the public. This is a political process, so this is public pressure, and once we have a little more information that we can move on or take action of, I would encourage
Well, those are
the
the things
board
we
and-
want to let sustainability committee know about, and those type of things, because those folks would, be active and local, and sometimes it's good to be out in front of some of those things also, and talk to our representatives and senators. I would also hope that, assuming, let's say they went forward, not this session, next session, or what have you, I mean, would we be grandfathered because we have that in?
It depends. I mean, it depends on the legislation. Depends how far we are in the process. Haven't got the contract yet, and certainly as we go through our process, one of the steps that we'll need to go through is a the solar installation is a permitted use in the agricultural zoning that the water plant is in. But it does need to be permitted through the planning and zoning, so we'll, depending on what this legislation is, it really changes what we're, what would stop us, and so ultimately we need to take care. I would hope, or I'm ambitious that, this project, that we're far enough through that we would be grandfathered, but, depending on what this legislation is and how it affects it, we may not be.
Anything else, Chris?
That is it.
Okay, good information. All right, now we need to consider entering into closed session in accordance with Iowa Code Section 388.9, parentheses 1, to discuss marketing and pricing strategies and proprietary information of the telecommunications division, whose competitive position will be harmed by public disclosure that is not required of potential or actual competitors, and no public purpose is served by such disclosure. Is there a motion?
So moved.
Motion and a second. Roll call, Jackie.
Board Member Forbush,
Yes.
Boyd,
Yes.
Rosga,
Yes.
Smith,
Yes.
White.
Yes.
We are now entered into closed session. Thank you, everyone.
Yep.